Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'm going to continue on with my analysis of the complete 8 Ball, issues 1 through 18 by Dan Clowes, the new collection out from Fantagraphics. I'm currently on issue number 7, which is the issue that has Art School Confidential in it, which I'm pretty excited about. I've been waiting to read that. I know I've seen it before, and I was looking forward to revisiting it now that I'm an educator myself, so I think I'm going to have to give a pretty panel by panel review of that one. So let's try and get through the rest of the book quick. I noticed on this one that I'm seeing like this format a lot in Clowes' art, and I've seen enough of his art before that I know that this is familiar to me. This just like character in the middle, totally symmetrical face. I think Clowes would probably be happy to just sit around and make up characters, make up these faces, and do these. I mean, there's just so many of them. Most of the covers are this way. All the Like a Velvet Glove cast in iron openers are that way. But he really likes just that big head. I think he'd be happy doing that. But he's a great artist and willing to put in work, so he does it. But I think that's probably his preferred mode. So issue 7, I noted when I was doing issue 6 that it had the Chicago guy. Issue 7 had the Chicago guy from issue 6 on the cover, or someone similar, so I thought maybe we were going to see a return to him. On the inside, this is the first time where we don't have the question-answer format, which I quite prefer to Needle Dick the Bug Fucker. I think this is probably my least favorite thing I've read in here. This is the kind of thing, as with Like a Velvet Glove cast in iron, that's like you do this in your sketchbook, you just don't put any restraints on yourself and you just let your imagination flow. And that's how I feel about the entire run of Like a Velvet Glove cast in iron. It feels like he's just making it up panel by panel. Same with this. It feels like he's just making something up, like a freestyle on the page almost. So that's a lot of fun as the creator. And then if you're lucky, you get something that's impactful on the reader as well. Like a Velvet Glove cast in iron at least goes on for long enough that you can kind of get sucked into the strangeness of it. Something like this is just this, invasive idea that he had that he's willing to put out in public. So I appreciate that he's brave like that. But it seems like this is much more in the underground art crumb, just letting loose your worst inner fantasy lands onto the paper. It's a lot of fun to do, but I just as a reader, I'm not too into it. So anyways, I don't know that I have much more to say about the Like a Velvet Glove cast in iron. It's surreal David Lynch stuff. I like this. This is the kind of thing that if I were doing this and I came up with it, I'd be so excited with these 2 panels as a creator. But as a reader, I just like, hey, whatever. Like he can't digest ketchup, so he's got this like colostomy sieve just for ketchup, which is fun and disgusting. As a fleeting idea, it's fun. I could imagine being excited. I imagine Clowes being excited when he drew those. It's like that moment of inspiration. You get the download, but I don't know. Whatever. That's about all I get out of that. I do like his letter pages here. They're getting more and more complex, where he's obviously hand lettering and designing them all. And you also see Clowes like ramping up the, oh, here's all these other things you can buy, which is smart on his part. And then I'm going to skip to the last story so we can come back and end on Art School Confidential, because it's the first thing I really, really, really liked reading this series. So this issue ends on just a little bit about Chicago, and basically an explanation of the character of Chicago and how Chicago came to develop this Chicago guy, the John Belushi character. Here he refers again to the mullet as just the ever popular neck warmer hairdo. So I guess when he was making this in 92, I would guess 91 still. This is November of 91. I would guess that they just hadn't come up with the term mullet or had it made its way to Chicago yet. That's interesting. Also, just Clowes being in Chicago, like imagining him and Chris Ware, I imagine they must have hung out at some point. But I know both of those guys are Chicago artists, so there's something in the water there in the 90s that was doing good. Here he's talking about the comedy clubs and the phony tell it like it is talk radio stations. and the blues clubs where all white upper middle class audiences imagine themselves to have soul, like to congregate. And I don't know, that's kind of annoying. Like when I was in Detroit, there was a place called the Northern Lights Lounge, and you could go watch Dennis Coffey, who was one of the original funk brothers and wrote songs like My Girl and just a lot of the classic Motown songs. He was the guitar player for it. Every Wednesday he went and played, and it was so awesome to go see a piece of history like that. So I don't know, like if white people have good taste in music, then fuck off, man. Like that's how I feel about it. Good music is good music, and if you get to go see good music and you're in a town like Detroit or Chicago that's got a history, like celebrate that history. Fuck what race you are. I don't know. That's crazy to me to even think about it like that. So anyways, that to me was completely expendable. I don't live in Chicago. I don't know anything about Chicago. Been there once in my life. Like I learn a little bit about it from here, but I don't feel like it's an actual picture of Chicago. It's just someone complaining. But Art School Confidential is so accurate that I have to believe Clowes to some extent that that's probably what Chicago was during the 80s. Like I'm assuming he's responding to Chicago of the 80s because this is early 90s. So whatever, that's what it was. I don't really care. I've never been there. It doesn't matter to me. Art School Confidential though, because I've I've been in art school most of my whole life. I've been in different art classes over the summers. I was always in art classes in school. I obviously went to school and got a degree. I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in fine art and painting. And then now I teach at a community college at three different community colleges. So I've been on every side of this, and Clowes' observations are pretty spot on, and I think they're almost worth a panel by panel response. Just as someone who's extremely familiar with this world, this one really speaks to me, and it's that same Clowes with his just like vicious charactering of people, his unfair charactering of people. But the characters in this one are all they always are in all of his stuff. They're 100% right. But with this one, it's like I'm so familiar with this, it's hard not to get into the meanness of it all, because when you've dealt with all of this, then it's easier to vibe on it. So understanding that he's doing everything that I've complained about in all of his other stories, it's just working for me better because I have more of a personal connection. But he's talking about in the old days, art schools taught practical techniques, and he's shown this guy like, if you can't do photo airbrushing and you want to go do Picasso stuff, go to Paris. And that's correct. Like it used to be a training program, and then sometime probably in the 70s that started to switch towards more conceptual concerns and what we now call like fine art, contemporary fine art. So a lot of what I'm doing as an educator is trying to balance these two things. I think education since the 90s has come along a little bit. So Mr. Clowes, maybe you helped a little bit, but in the 90s, the 80s and 90s, this would have been very true that he would have walked into a classroom and most of the professors would, and he was going to SVA, I think, is if that's correct. I'm not sure. I remember listening to the kayfabe interview. He went to an art school, not a art program within a major university, but it's about the same, just a little more focused on art. But anyways, I think a lot of educators, at least myself, now try and mix these two, like trying to give them real technical stuff, but also preparing them for the theoretical and conceptual stuff that they're going to have to be vying with in the art world, or at least be familiar. You don't want to be ignorant of that stuff. So it's not necessarily that I think a lot of art that fits in this mode is great. It's just that there are certain like things you need to be aware of in history. And I've talked in multiple videos about Dan Clowes and Chris Ware feeling like guys who brought comics to art school, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. He wants to do comics. He wants to know the skills. He wants to learn how to letter. He wants to know how to draw. And he doesn't want anything to do with the theory and the conceptual stuff. And Chris Ware feels that way to me too. He's a real technician. And they're both obviously intelligent, thoughtful guys as well. But I don't think that they cared so much about this part of the art school experience. Whereas I feel like there's a lot of stuff coming into comics now where they're being trained this way. They've picked up these skills, whether at school or on their own, and then now they're applying them in their comics. And I really, really, really enjoy that new influx into comics from this segment. This segment and like the Clowes, the people who are too obsessed with the history of comics, I feel like in the 90s they pushed things forward, now they're holding things back. like this book itself, if it came out today, would be regressive for comics. So Clowes has that, and I could see why art school put him off, because he was trying to get some real skills, but I also think maybe he was depriving himself of expanding his boundaries. He was being a little closed-minded. And he says, the teacher's not there to help you. Most of them are still freelancers, and the last thing they want is more competition. That's probably quite true at a for-profit art school. I would say at the community colleges, teachers are very, very much there to help. A lot of us at the community colleges, like myself, are still practicing artists, but we're at a community college to teach. We understand that that's our mission, so we're there to help. I can't say that for everyone, but for me. And it's saying, the teachers are there because they kind of failed, and they, or they're freelancers, which isn't the most stable job, and so they're going to get a steady paycheck, and they hope to score some pussy. Well, yeah, the steady paycheck part is definitely true. I never wanted to make money off my art. I never wanted to be tempted to keep doing the same thing when something got successful. I never wanted to have to do what was popular. I didn't want to have to draw superheroes. I want to do my thing my way. And teaching is a great way to make a living, and then I have enough time to do things. I'm not able to contribute in the way that Dan Clowes or Ed Piscor, or someone who's like just a workhorse. I can't do that because I teach, but that provides me the lifestyle I want. I'm not willing to live the life of the poor cartoonist hoping to make it to like a Clowes level. I'm just not. That's not how I want to live. So I teach, and I love teaching, and I get to do my art on the side. So there is something accurate about that, but I'm not worried at all about competition. You'll definitely find those people who don't want competition, and you'll find a number of these type of people as well, who they don't actually know how to draw. All they are is theorists or bullshitters. They just know how to talk and talk and talk and talk their way through things. And so those people are definitely very worried about being exposed. They don't want someone with skill coming into their department. So you have a problem in a lot of universities where that's filled with this panel and not this panel. And someone like me who can do this, or even straddle both, this is seen as a threat, honestly, because like I've gone to schools that are like this, and I'm the one guy with technical skills. When I was at Berkeley as a student, I had students say about my work, I've never seen a drawing so good in my life. And I was just a student. I wasn't that great. I was doing big, ambitious things, pretty good for a student. And they wanted those skills. Like we had a meeting with professors where they wanted the skills, and I was told personally by one of the professors that my ask for more technical stuff was like regressive, and that she didn't need that to be a successful artist. So I was just being old school. A guy that went to Berkeley about 10 years before me, who was interested in realist stuff, was told he was an art Nazi. Someone else who was taught by the same mentor as me, who would send a lot of us to Berkeley for the philosophy rather than the art. So that's all very real stuff, and it was definitely at a peak during the 90s, like this conceptual versus technical stuff. So there are a lot of people that are scared. They know they have no skills. They know they don't have anything to offer, and they fear that if the students start demanding skills, then they don't have anything to offer. They really, really don't. And it's a huge problem in the education system. So he's very right about that. There are two reasons to go to art school: no work, loose women. When I was in grad school, the thing I enjoyed the most about it was that I had 2 years to do whatever I want, wherever I want, whenever I want, however I want, whatever I want, with whoever I want. I was just free to be an artist for 2 years, and that was amazing. I tried to stay out of the whole, because at Cranbrook, where I went, most people live on campus, and so if you get involved in the dating aspects of things, it gets a little tricky. I didn't totally stay away from that, but I definitely wasn't there for loose women. But it was not fun dating in such an environment. Unfortunately, most of the gals who go to art school are super ugly, which is why 60% of the guys turn gay by their first vacation. That wasn't my experience. There were plenty of lovely people that I went to school with, male and female. And where I went to school, my roommate was one of the 3 out of the 180 students that were in my grad school. My roommate was one of 3 gay men, and he was very frustrated by the lack of other gays on campus. I'm guessing now that's probably shifted, but when I was in school, that wasn't the case. And there were plenty of good looking men and women on campus. And then he says, believe me, if there is a beautiful art school girl, they're real trouble. And that's probably true. But I don't think it's just the women. I think pretty much anyone going to art school has some psychological damage. Me and Tori have talked about that. She went and visited Cranbrook with me, and she was like, this is just a bunch of like fucked up people paying $60,000 for 2 years of art therapy. And like, that's a fairly decent assessment of what was going on there. But I mean, it's part of learning how to talk about your work is really digging deep and admitting to yourself some of the deeper, darker things about yourself that you might need to work out in your art. So that's true. But yeah, and it was like a $60,000 plus interest now therapy session. Also a piece of paper. That's what I was there for. I wanted that piece of paper so I could teach. But I don't think it's accurate to say the art school girls are real trouble. I mean that is accurate, but I think the guys are probably trouble too for the most part. He's going on about don't get excited about the figure drawing models. I've seen both. I've seen attractive figure drawing models and then exactly what he's drawing here. I'm pretty sure I've seen this exact guy. When I was at the Kubert school, there was a guy that looked like this that came in, and I just remember him turning around backwards and like doing this dynamic Spider-Man pose, but basically he was just showing his asshole to the girls in the class. He like kind of just sprayed the room with it and then focused his little brown eye right at the cutest girl in the class. When I was at Kubert school, I was in the one class that had all the girls in our year, so I think there was 4 or 5 girls in our class, and it was like, oh my god, all the girls are in the class. And it was a school full of comic geeks, and this model that looked like this dude came in, and he definitely would pay attention to the girls. I know Sergio Carrillo had a model that he called Drippy, and I think it might be this guy. And I've definitely seen some female models like that when I was in the Bay Area in Berkeley, where there was a models guild. We definitely had a few who are on hormone treatment and stuff as well. So that seems pretty accurate. But there's plenty of beautiful models. I've taught figure drawing too. Where I taught figure drawing in Modesto, it was a bit strange because there's no professional models guild. So we were mostly pulling. We would advertise and we would just have students. So I got to work with all of the models. And they're all wonderful people. So that I actually preferred that situation to working with the professional models guild, because we could basically in teaching figure drawing, you'd start to see the kids who had an interest in being on the other side of it. Then you get them in there, you pay them, and you kind of train them, and you build a relationship with them. So like it's really about what you as an instructor want from that one class, and that was a really awesome way. And then the models became like family too. Like the models themselves grouped together and became friends, and we all, it was just like a really, I love that class. That was my favorite class I've ever taught. The whole class becomes a really friendly family environment, which is like the opposite of what you would think with figure drawing. But in the Bay Area where we had professional models, you couldn't do that because they had like these rules. Like I remember one model being there and being really mad because me and my friends were having a good time and laughing, and she like thought that we were laughing at her body or something, and like we were just goofing around. Like we had been in figure drawing, I don't know, that was like my fourth or sixth time in a figure drawing class. So I was getting practice, but we were pretty bored, and there was a bunch of guys that like comics, so we would like take the pose and turn it into superheroes or whatever. And this one professional model especially really didn't like that we're goofing around and having fun. Whereas when I taught, and it's all people that we got from our student population, and we've trained them, and it's like this tight little family environment that we're able to create. The class was awesome. It was so much fun and so much respect for the models and stuff we're able to build into it. So I've had both experiences there. The recurring character types are pretty spot on. These have shifted a bit as the years go by, but they're still, I think, pretty accurate. You have the tech wizard. That's true. I've seen plenty of tech art projects. The hopeless case, what he's referring to here actually seems like the real technicians. It's a realistic portrait of James Garner done in the style reminiscent of Flemish masters. So this is someone who's, he says these people become art directors. Those are people that have developed their own skill. They're just a hopeless case in that situation because no one gave a fuck about those skills anymore. I think he's also suggesting that the guy's not very talented because the drawing here definitely doesn't look like in the style of. He's also suggesting that they have zero ideas. nothing worth saying. It's just a portrait of an actor, really technically competent. So I get that. I have plenty of students who do that. They're amazing technical wizards. What they do with colored pencils or whatever, amazing. But they're just drawing pictures off the internet of like Wolverine, and I can't get them to do anything else than that. So I get why you're saying the hopeless case, but also like that's the technical. These are the guys that have the technical ability that you're kind of bemoaning that has been lost. So you want to encourage those guys because those are who you want to be the instructor. They're not necessarily going to be the most amazing artists with the best thing to say, but they're going to have that deep well of technique that you're looking for. So I think we should vie for the hopeless case a little more. Joe Pro, that's definitely a thing where you'll have people who are a little bit older who will come back and they're already making work, but they're there to get the piece of paper. He says they're staying in school to annoy the rest of us, but look, someone like this needs a piece of paper because they might want to teach or something, so that could be happening. The mom, I find it really hard to believe that you would find that in art schools anymore because private art schools are so expensive. But I have a number of these in my community college classes, and that's one of the things I love about the community college is that I can have people of all ages. That's been going away a little bit as community colleges start to focus on graduation rates and transfer rates. That's coming from the government, not the administrators. The government's coming in and saying your funding comes from transfer rates and graduation rates. And so now the goal is to get everyone in and out in 2.5 years. And people like this, community members who are just taking classes for self-enrichment, don't fit into that as well. And so they're not as big of a part of the community college experience as when I was a student. And I think that's a detriment to the experience. It's really, really good for an 18-year-old to be in a class. When I was in a class in like my 20s, I went back a little bit later. I went to the Kubert School, took a couple years, and then went back into the community college and then to Berkeley and then to Cranbrook. But when I was there, as I'm like a young 20s, we had like a guy in the class that was in his 90s. He was so old, his head would split open from his skin being dry, and he just started bleeding. Well, Larry, you're bleeding. And a woman named Betty, who was a grandmother who was in basically all of my art classes and became really good friends with her. And that's a great part of the community college experience that I miss. I still get some like that, and they're always the best students. I get a lot more of these in my California classes than I do here in Alabama, just because in California, at one of the institutions I teach at, drawing, well, it's required to take some kind of art class. So a lot of people take art classes, a lot of nursing students and stuff. And these are always the best students. Completely talentless, rich housewife with too much time on her hands. No, these are always the best students. Like, it's okay for someone wanting to learn things for self-enrichment. So fuck you, Dan Clowes. They're amazing students, and you should have got to know her because you probably could have learned something as a young man from her. Mr. Fantasy, who only does Frazetta styles, that was probably super accurate. I think now it's more likely, you're going to get the Dragon Ball Z kid, but same kind of thing. I definitely had the Frazetta guy in my painting class in community college. Is this old, like, bald, skinhead looking bike? I mean, he wasn't a skinhead, but old, bald, shaved head. Biker guy that painted a lot of Frazetta stuff. So I'm familiar with that. But that's switched now. It's more likely the geeky young kid who just draws Dragon Ball all day. And then the macho art sadist that's going to draw his girlfriend in a bunch of sexually explicit positions and make her show up. And the other thing is, I believe that all of these are for sure 100% things that Clowes saw in real life. Like, he actually experienced that for sure. I do not doubt that at all. And that is a type. There was a guy at Cranbrook that had graduated prior to me who was really famous for having made a sculpture of the girl that he was dated while at Cranbrook, but she was like short and had a flat head so you could put a beer on it, and that had pissed off my instructor. So there's a lot of that. You also get the women who like to draw themselves like that. And then I actually remember, like, this little spread leg drawing here. A girl at Berkeley did a drawing just like that, and then had, like, it was a stencil that she could spray paint through around town to, like, tag her nude body. And then it said, like, "You don't own me," or something like that. And I got in a lot of trouble for telling her, like, "No, but you're giving it, I don't own you, but you're giving it away for free all over town with this stencil." That didn't go over well. That was the first time I ever got called a misogynist. That was also my first post to Facebook ever, because I just got on Facebook for an art project. I needed to get to to other students' pictures to do pictures of them without their permission, basically. So I got on Facebook, which had just started in 2005, 2006 at the Berkeley campus. And you had to be on campus at that point. You could only be friends with people who are on your campus. So my first post on Facebook ever, which is all deleted now, but I have it saved, is, well, I guess I'm a misogynist. And it was because I had been in a critiquing a drawing like this. So I've seen similar things. This right here, where the guy trashes his dorm room and passes it off as a project. Callion, our buddy NFN Callion, told us about him doing this exact thing and the professor thinking it was genius. I definitely had a friend who just missed class one day that he was supposed to perform, and he said missing class was his performance. So that's 100% true. That happens all the time, and that we've backed ourselves into a corner because all the things that we've taught the kids, they have ground to stand on in terms of this being acceptable as art. So there's nothing we can really do about it. And he's saying that, most of the teachers will go on and on about this kind of stuff. It's almost like we're obligated to, like, you have to sit there because the art world, it's not necessarily art school. It's just the art history has got us to the point where you have to take this seriously if someone does it. And it sucks. You don't want to. You want to be this. You want to be the pragmatist who's like actually giving them information, giving them technique. This pragmatist is telling them the truth about the pyramid scheme of art schools and the art world. That one out of 100 of you will find work in your chosen field, and it's probably even lower than that. And he goes into like, what can you do with it? And that's on the next page. And that's all important. Like, you got to talk about it. But every kid is sitting there going, well, I'll be the one. And so, okay, well, I'm going to help you as best as I can, but most of you aren't going to make it. And here he's talking about that it becomes more about talking about the work. That's true. I mean, the unfortunate thing about how our education's structured now is that we've separated out the talking about it and the theory and the concept, which you need. You need to be eloquent. That's part of what we're teaching our kids to do. We're in the liberal arts. I guess this isn't an art school, not in a liberal arts institution. But even there, you're part of a liberal arts program, which is trying to make well-rounded humans who are critical thinkers. And part of being a critical thinker is being a critical speaker and someone who can both talk about their own work and others' work, intelligently. That's like what I'm trying to do here, go through this and formulate a thorough analysis of it. That's what a critique is. That's what my critiques in my classes are, is that's not just this is what's good about it or this is what's bad about it. It's a thorough evaluation of. And so this ability, this gift of gab, there is a very obnoxious part of that in the art world where there are people who are real good at schmoozing and making them sound smarter than they are. But in an educational context, you want to force your kids to do that, because if you're doing it right, you're trying to teach them how to not be the blah, blah, blah people and how to be people who actually say something worth saying. So that goes wrong a lot of the times, but that's what should be happening here. And then he's just talking about, like, don't ignore the amazing experience of all the stories that you're going to have from art school. If you got to suffer through art school, at least enjoy how crazy it is. And that's 100% true. I mean, I could do 2 days worth of 3 days worth of just crazy stories from art school. And that was so well worth it. As long as I didn't get permanently hurt or killed, I'm willing to go through whatever for a good story. And art school, I got stories for days. And then he's saying, photograph some things, because there's things that you'll have seen that you wish you had a photograph of, like this pointillist clown drawing. And I love that that etched itself in its memory so much that that's probably pretty close to what it looked like. And this one here, Nick Friedman's self-portrait, which I think might be, is that same guy? No, a little bit different character. It looks like kind of the same style. Really, really apparently appreciated that self-portrait. But, I'm curious if he changed the name or not. And then he's talking about this metalhead guy who just did the copies of pinup girls. Like, I totally believe all of this. And then he goes into the jobs that you could have. And retail sales art in a art supply store. Yep, been there, done that. Worked at Michael's, worked at Joanne Fabric, worked at Aaron Brothers Art. I was in the picture framing department, but I did plenty of stuff on the floor with stocking art supplies, and as the guy with the graduate degree in art working at a Michael's craft store for the 2 years after I graduated. That's what I did until I could teach. I was a frame store manager for Michael's. I was always be the guy that get called out. It's like, you have a master's degree in painting. This person on this grandma on the floor has a question about chalk. Can you come talk to her? So I definitely did that. The other one was assistant art director, i.e. pace up artist. I don't really have any experience with that. That's probably not as much of a job now. I'd imagine, especially with AI, that's going away. And he says, remember, the only piece of paper less valuable than one of your paintings is a BFA degree. Yeah, BFA is not going to get you much. MFA can get you to, he says here, you can put in a few more years and become a teacher yourself. Steady paycheck, young pussy. That's how he looks at it. So that's true. A bachelor's in fine art's not going to do much for you other than just a regular job that's going to say, hey, like, as long as you have a degree, that's all we need. Or for a lot of like graphic design jobs and industry jobs like this, you would be fine. So there are jobs to be had. Of course, with the AI, we worry that those are diminishing even further. And then he is correct that if you go on to get your MFA, then you could be one of these teachers that he hates so much. But that's not as easy as it seems. It took me 10 years to get a full-time job. It took me 3 years of applying with no luck, and then just a happenstance that I got my first part-time teaching job. And then it took me that was 2013, and it took me until August of 20. So I got my first part-time teaching job in August of 2013, and I got my full-time job here in Alabama in August of 2020. And I was applying probably 40 to 80 applications a year during that 2010 when I first started applying, trying to get my adjunct work coming out of grad school. I graduated in 2011, so I started applying in late 2010, early 2011. And so it took me that long. It took me 10 years to secure a full-time position, 2 to get my foot in the door, and then another 7.5, 8 years to actually get a career job. So I made the mistake. I thought I was taking the easy route out. It was like, look, I'm going to teach. I don't want to try and make a living as an artist. I don't want to be a famous artist. I don't want to be a professional artist. I want my art to be my thing that I do for myself. I want to teach to make a living. And I thought that was a pretty humble, like, dream. I didn't want a lot out of life. I wasn't asking a lot. And it was so frustrating that it was so hard to get a job. And it really is a pyramid, right? Like, you've got all the high school students in the nation, and then like you've got the one kid at each school that's like the art kid, and those all go on to like the community college or the 4-year art school, the 4-year university, and they get their BFAs. And then like out of those, it shrinks down even narrow to the kids that can get the MFAs and can afford it and can get into the schools and can get through the 2 or 3 year program. And then out of those, you could have like 200 some odd people applying for one teaching position. I've been part of hiring committees now. We're in Alabama, so we don't get as many applications, but I've been told about at bigger jobs that I've applied to where I know people, that there were up to 400 applications for just a basic drawing position. So that's the pyramid. And for me to maintain my position up here, we need all of those students down there. And that's just the reality of it. So this idea of like, get that degree and you can become a teacher and you'll be able to pay your debts, that's not a very secure route. And it's a very hard route. And it's probably just as hard as being a successful artist, or harder. And the worst thing is to get those teaching jobs, your resume has to have a big long list of successes as a professional artist. So me trying to be a teacher to avoid all of what I'd have to go through to become a professional artist, because I didn't want to deal with it. I just wanted to make my stuff for my own sake. I had to be a professional artist anyway. So you kind of get this double whammy if you're going to be a teacher. So Hopefully by the time people go through all of that, they're taking it a little more seriously. The flip side of that is once you go through all those hoops, you're pretty like, fuck it, I've earned it. I'm just gonna call it in. I'm gonna phone it in. You know, I've done my dues, and I think there are a lot of people who take that. Really, what you got to think is like, okay, I've done all this hard work to get here, and now that I've got here, now I have to work like 4 times, 10 times as hard, and that sucks. So it sucks that Dan Clowes, apparently all his teachers were the people that were phoning it in, or they were so busy as freelancers, you know, that they were trying to preserve their energy. That's like a very real part of it. If you're going to keep trying to make art and you're talking about art all day, there's a certain limit of how much you can do before you're burnt out on art. So yeah, I think this is, you know, Art School Confidential is so far my favorite thing that I've read by Dan Clowes, and I have a very good memory of it. I enjoyed, and I'm curious if it keeps going, because the movie that they made out of it is much longer and goes into like this whole murder mystery story. I don't know if that happens in the book or not, or if Art School Confidential is just this one off. I'm pretty sure it's just this one off. It says the end, not to be continued. So I don't know why they took the movie in that way. Like the first half of that movie was hilarious because it was so spot on, and then it devolved into that murder mystery. But these 4 pages here, I think, are, you know, the height of Clowes at the height of his critical character powers, or at least I'm able to appreciate it more because I'm so much closer to it. But I do think there's a lot of things that, you know, he's still seen through a very grumpy worldview, and, you know, some of that maybe things have just shifted since the late 80s, early 90s. But I think this all still pretty much pertains. I think, you know, we're lucky in that hopefully there's more of a combo of these two things happening now. From what I can see, skill and concept are coming back into favor together now, and that's a really great thing. But I'm not sure how the AI is going to impact all of that. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. As I was talking about this page, I noticed too, when I was reading, I didn't notice, but this dude had his fly open, and you can see his underwear. That's a pretty funny little bit of cartooning. So this was definitely my favorite issue so far, in that it contained these 4 pages. Is really did it for me. The rest of the issue, actually, I found to be the most disposable issue so far. So thank goodness for Art School Confidential in here. Dan Clowes at peak critical ability. So that's it for issue 7. If you appreciate what we're doing here on the channel, the best ways to support us are through our Patreon. We have some different voting tiers there. We have some different ways that you could win some original artwork. I'm going to start uploading some more experimental little short experiments that I have in mind up there that will probably be just exclusive experiments for Patreon. So give that a look. And then the most important thing is to support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll take a look at a couple of his products now. Centralia is an awesome, gorgeous comic by rising Dutch star Miel Van de Peet. This is his first work. It's a really great sci-fi story. There's a world in the future where the sun has gotten so hot that people can't be on the ground. So they have to run around. There's a lot of conceits that go with that. You know, what is the world that looks like? And I think you can see by the art that Sean's description of this book as like a Moebius for young adults, a YA Moebius, is a really great description of this really gorgeous and like wild, wacky, fun book. Issue number 5 of The Abolition of Man is a real treat for me. We got to collaborate with one of my heroes, Luciano Floridi, whose philosophy of information, I think, is one of the most important things going in the world right now, has been essential to forming my own philosophical worldview, and has been essential to my art practice over the last 20 years. So I'm so excited to get to collaborate with Luciano. He provided a wonderful essay to wrap up this series. It's a focus on how humans maintain dignity in the age of AI, and I think to end off this project, this is the perfect kind of coda to the whole project. So really excited about this, and hope you all get to go pick it up. And I'm going to put it out there now. I think it's probably the most erudite comic that's ever been written. So please go check that out. I think this book really matters. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.